Most people think the most expensive thing in a billionaire's pocket is his black card. They're wrong. Sometimes it's a secret. Sutton Blake, a waitress drowning in debt, thought she was just serving a double scotch to a Wall Street titan. Then he slid a napkin across the table. $1,000 cash, one single word written in blue ink. He told her if she could translate it, she'd get 10,000 more. Sutton didn't just translate a word that night. She unlocked a door to a $200 million nightmare that the FBI couldn't crack. But the billionaire made one fatal mistake. He didn't check who was serving his drink. This is the story of how a waitress brought down an empire. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Sutton Blake watched the water streak against the plate glass window of the Obsidian Room, an exclusive steakhouse perched on the top floor of the Columbia Tower. Down below, the city was a grid of amber lights. Up here, it was the smell of aged truffle oil, cigar smoke, and fear. Sutton adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric rubbed against a bruise on her hip, a souvenir from bumping into the prep table during the lunch rush. She was 26, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. 3 years ago, she had been a doctoral candidate in computational linguistics at Cambridge, dissecting dead languages and banking ciphers. Now she was dissecting tips to see if she could afford rent for her studio apartment in Bremerton. Table 4 needs a refill. The floor manager, a man named Henderson, who smelled perpetually of mints and desperation, hissed in her ear. "And don't look him in the eye. It's Ainsley Brooks." Sutton froze. The name dropped the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. Ainsley Brooks wasn't just rich, he was by a country rich. He was the CEO of Apex Global Holdings, a private equity firm that had recently swallowed up half the pharmaceutical companies in the Pacific Northwest. He was also, according to the tabloids, a recluse. She picked up the crystal decanter of scotch, a Macallan 1926 that cost more per shot than her car, and walked toward the corner booth. Brooks sat alone. He didn't look like a titan of industry. He looked like a man haunting his own life. His suit was a bespoke Savile Row charcoal, but his tie was loosened and his grey hair was disheveled. He was staring at his phone with an intensity that suggested he was trying to set it on fire with his mind. "Mr. Brooks," Sutton said softly, pouring the amber liquid. "Your refill." He didn't flinch, he didn't blink. He just slammed his hand down on the table, covering the phone screen. When he looked up, his eyes were bloodshot. "You," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "You're the one who speaks." "What was it?" "Henderson said you speak everything." Sutton took a step back, clutching the tray. "I speak a few languages, sir. I have a background in linguistics." Brooks studied her face, searching for something. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "There is $1,000 in there," he said. Sutton's heart hammered against her ribs. "Sir, I can't—" "Shut up and listen," he snapped. But there was no malice in it, only panic. He grabbed a cocktail napkin and a Mont Blanc pen. His hand shook as he scribbled something. He pushed the napkin toward her. 1,000 now. 10,000 more if you can tell me what this means, not the literal translation, the context, the origin." Sutton looked down. Written in a jagged, frantic scrawl was a single compound word. "Krypteia zer zero." She frowned. Krypteia. It's ancient Greek. It refers to a secret police force in Sparta. They were trained to hunt and kill helots without getting caught. But the suffix, zero. "I know the history," Brooks hissed, looking over his shoulder. "I need to know the dialect. Look at the spelling. Look at the syntax of the Zed. It's not standard." Sutton squinted. He was right. The Zed had a cross strike through it, a specific notation she hadn't seen since her days archiving Cold War-era banking ledgers for her thesis. "That's not just a letter," Sutton whispered, the world around her fading away. "That's a marker. It's a localized cipher used by the UBS archives in Zurich during the late 90s. It denotes a zero balance account. A ghost account." Brooks's face went pale. He slumped back into the leather booth. "A ghost account," he muttered. "God help us." He looked at Sutton, really looked at her for the first time. "You're sure?" "I wrote a paper on it," she said. "Why is this on a napkin, Mr. Brooks?" He didn't answer. He stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. He shoved the envelope of cash into her apron pocket. "Keep it. Forget you saw me. Forget the word." "Wait," Sutton said, instinct overriding protocol. "If that's a Zurich ghost marker, whatever is attached to it doesn't exist on paper. It's used for laundering. High-level laundering." Brooks froze. He leaned in close, smelling of scotch and terror. "It's not laundering, kid. It's an extraction. And if I don't find the key to that account by midnight, a lot of innocent people are going to lose everything." He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sutton standing there with $1,000 in her pocket and a napkin that felt radioactive. She didn't know it yet, but Ainsley Brooks wasn't the villain of this story. He was the first victim. Sutton's shift ended at 11 p.m. She didn't go home. She sat in her 2008 Honda Civic in the parking garage, the engine idling to run the heater. The rain drummed against the roof. She had the dome light on, the napkin spread out on the dashboard next to her cracked iPhone. Kryptaya Zia 0. She opened her banking app. 4218. She opened the envelope Brooks gave her, 10 $100 bills. She could pay her rent. She could fix her car. She could walk away. But the look in Brooks's eyes haunted her. It wasn't the look of a man trying to hide money. It was the look of a man trying to find it. She pulled her laptop out of her backpack. The screen flickered to life. She wasn't just a waitress. She was the daughter of Robert Blake, a forensic accountant who had died in a car accident 4 years ago, just before he was set to testify against a shell corporation in the Caymans. Sutton had inherited his debt, his paranoia, and his brilliance. She logged into a secure server, a remnant of her university access she was supposed to have surrendered years ago. She began to cross-reference the term, search query. Kryptaya plus Zurich plus syntax variation B, 0 hits. She tried a different angle, the cross-strike Z. It wasn't just Swiss, it was used by a specific software developer named Lucas Vane in the early 2000s. Vane had designed the security architecture for the European Central Bank before vanishing. "Okay, Brooks," she muttered, "how are you connected to a missing coder?" She searched for Apex Global Holdings and Lucas Vane. Nothing. She searched for Apex Global and Kryptaya. And there it was, buried deep in a PDF of a redacted court filing from a lawsuit in Malta 3 years ago. Project Kryptaya. It was listed as a consulting fee aimed at pension fund restructuring. Sutton felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Seattle rain. Pension funds. Brooks had said, a lot of innocent people are going to lose everything. She was about to close the laptop when a notification popped up on her screen. A news alert. Breaking news. Billionaire Ainsley Brooks found dead in apparent suicide. Body discovered in Seattle penthouse. Sutton stopped breathing. She looked at the time on her phone. 11:42 p.m. She had served him less than 2 hours ago. He was alive. He was scared. He wasn't suicidal. He was desperate to solve a puzzle. By midnight, he had said. She looked at the napkin again. It wasn't a question he was asking her. It was a failsafe. He knew he was being watched. He knew he might not make it out of the restaurant. He had given the clue to the only person in the room who looked like they were invisible. The waitress. Her phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Sutton stared at it. No one called her at this hour. She let it ring. It stopped. Then a text message appeared. "He gave you something. We want it. You have 30 minutes to bring it to the ferry terminal. Come alone, or we go to Bremerton." They knew where she lived. Sutton threw the car into reverse, tires screeching on the concrete. She wasn't going to the ferry terminal. She was going to the one place her father had told her to go if the world ever fell apart. A small, dusty bookshop in Pioneer Square, owned by a man named Timothy. The drive to Pioneer Square was a blur of paranoia. Every set of headlights in her rearview mirror looked like a hit squad. Sutton drifted through red lights, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She parked 3 blocks away from the pages of time and ran through the alleyways. The shop was dark, the closed sign hanging crookedly in the window. She pounded on the heavy oak door. "Timothy, it's Sutton." A moment later, the locks tumbled. The door opened a crack, revealing an elderly man with thick spectacles and a cardigan that had seen better decades. Timothy wasn't just a bookseller. He was her father's old partner in forensic accounting before they both got burned. "Sutton?" He pulled her inside and bolted the door. "Child, you look like you've seen a ghost." I saw Ainsley Brooks tonight, she gasped, leaning against a stack of encyclopedias. 2 hours before he died. Timothy's face went slack. Brooks? The Apex merger? He gave me this. She slammed the napkin onto the counter. Timothy adjusted his glasses, squinting at the ink. When he saw the cross-strike Z'd, he recoiled as if the napkin were a viper. Where did you get this? He wrote it. He offered me money to translate it. Timothy, they killed him, and now they're texting me. Timothy grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me very carefully. This isn't just a word, it's a passkey. Cryptizia isn't a project name, it's a server address on the dark web. But not just any server, it's a dead man's switch. He hurried over to a computer hidden behind a stack of maps. He typed furiously. Years ago, Lucas Vane built a system called the Oubliette. It was designed to hold the darkest secrets of the global banking elite. Evidence of fraud, bribes, toppling governments. If the owner of the key doesn't enter the code every 24 hours, the Oubliette unlocks and dumps the data to every news agency on the planet. So Brooks was the key holder? Sutton asked. No, Timothy said, his screen reflecting blue light onto his face. Brooks was being blackmailed. He was trying to access the switch to stop a transfer. Look here. He pointed to a scrolling line of code. Someone initiated a transfer of $200 million from the Washington State Teachers Pension Fund at 9 p.m. tonight. They routed it through a shell company in Estonia. Brooks must have found out. He tried to stop it, but he needed the override code. The word on the napkin, Sutton realized. He didn't need me to translate it for him. He needed me to translate it for someone else if he died. Who? Sutton thought back to the restaurant. Brooks hadn't just been looking at his phone. He had been looking at the door. He was waiting for someone. Or he was afraid of someone. The text message, Sutton said. They said, "We want it." They don't know what it is. They just saw him hand me something. If they get that password, Timothy said grimly, they don't just steal the $200 million. They can rewrite the ledger. They can make it look like Brooks stole it himself. They can frame a dead man and walk away clean. Who are they, Timothy? Timothy turned the screen toward her. It showed the board of directors for Apex Global. One face stood out, a man with a shark-like smile and perfect teeth, Jonathan Vane. Lucas Vane's brother, Timothy whispered. He changed his name to Jonathan Sterling. No, wait. Jonathan Cross. He's the COO of Apex. Sutton's blood ran cold. She had served Jonathan Cross before. He always tipped 0. We have to open the file, Sutton said. If we can access the Oubliette before Cross does, we can prove he killed Brooks. It's suicide to try, Timothy warned. I have nothing left to lose, Sutton said, her voice hardening. They know where I live. They know my car. I can't run. The only way out is through. Timothy sighed, then cracked a small, terrified smile. You really are your father's daughter. Okay, to use the passkey, we need a terminal with a direct connection to the Swift banking network. We can't do it from here. My IP is flagged. Where can we go? Timothy looked at her. There's only one place in Seattle with that kind of unsecured hardline access at this time of night. The server room at the Gilded Tower. The Gilded Tower? Sutton asked. The building where the Obsidian Room is, Timothy said. You have to go back to work. The Columbia Tower, often called the Gilded Tower by the locals who couldn't afford to step inside, pierced the Seattle night like a shard of black glass. At 1 a.m., the building should have been a tomb of commerce, silent and empty. Instead, the plaza was a chaotic strobing sea of red and blue lights. Sutton Blake sat in the passenger seat of Timothy's rusted Volvo, watching the police perimeter. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds of her courage. This is insanity, Timothy muttered, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. The place is swarming with cops. Brooks's body is still in the building, Sutton. The homicide unit will have the elevators locked down. Sutton pulled her hair back into a tight, severe bun. She reached into the back seat and grabbed her work bag. Inside was her uniform, the crisp black trousers, the white button-down, the apron. It was her camouflage. They locked down the guest elevators, Sutton said, her voice steadier than she felt. But the service elevators are on a separate grid. They run on a keycard system for the janitorial staff and the kitchen crew. The police won't know the override codes, but Henderson does. Henderson? Your manager? Timothy scoffed. The man who would sell his own mother for a carton of cigarettes. Exactly, Sutton said. He's weak and he's greedy. If I tell him I left my wallet in the locker room and I'll give him $50 to let me up, he won't ask questions. He'll just want the cash. And if he's gone home? He never goes home on a night like this, Sutton replied, opening the car door. The cold, damp air hit her face. A billionaire died in his restaurant. Henderson is probably up there right now, drinking the inventory and trying to figure out how to spin this to the owners so he doesn't get fired. She stepped out into the rain. Keep the line open, Timothy. Once I'm in the server room on the 40th floor, I'm going to need you to guide me through the firewall. I can read the Greek, but I can't rewrite the TCP/IP protocols without your help. Just don't get caught, Timothy whispered. If Cross finds you before the police do. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Sutton walked toward the service entrance in the alleyway, her head down, avoiding the media circus out front. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and exhaust. She reached the steel door and punched in the employee code 1984. The buzzer sounded, a harsh, angry noise. The door clicked, unlocking. She slipped inside. The service corridor was stark white, fluorescent lights humming overhead. It was a different world from the mahogany and velvet of the dining room upstairs. This was the guts of the building, concrete, pipes, and the smell of industrial bleach. She made it to the service elevator without seeing a soul. She pressed the button. The doors slid open with a groan. She stepped in and pressed 76, the restaurant level. She needed to get to the locker room first to retrieve the keycard for the server floor. The elevator ascended slowly. Ding, ding, ding. When the doors opened on the 76th floor, the silence was deafening. The restaurant was dark, save for the emergency lighting that cast long, skeletal shadows across the tables. Police tape zigzagged across the entrance to the main dining area where Brooks had died. Sutton ducked under a velvet rope and crept toward the kitchen. "Who's there?" A voice cracked through the darkness. Sutton froze. She recognized the voice. It wasn't a cop. "Henderson?" she whispered. A figure emerged from the shadows of the wine cellar. It was Henderson, but he looked wrecked. His tie was undone, his face flushed with alcohol. He was holding a half-empty bottle of cognac. "Sutton?" He squinted at her, swaying slightly. "What are you doing here?" "Place is a crime scene. Feds are crawling all over the penthouse. They just left here 10 minutes ago." I left my keys," Sutton lied, stepping into the light. "I couldn't get into my apartment. I saw the news. I had to come back." Henderson let out a bitter laugh. "Keys. Right. Everyone wants something tonight. The cops want statements. The press wants photos. The owners want me to bleach the booth where the old man croaked." He took a swig of the cognac. "Did you see it? Did you see him do it?" Sutton's heart raced. "No. I was in the back." "Good," Henderson muttered. "Bad for business. Suicide. People think the food is cursed." Sutton moved closer. "Henderson, I need the master keycard, the one for the lower levels. My keys might be in the staff lounge on 40. 40? Henderson frowned. "That's maintenance, and the server farm. I took a shortcut through there earlier to throw out trash. Please, Henderson, it's freezing outside and I can't get home." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a $50 bill, half of the remaining cash she had to her name. Henderson eyed the money. Greed, as predictable as gravity, took over. He fumbled at his belt and unclipped a heavy magnetic card. 5 minutes, he slurred, snatching the bill. "If the cops come back and find you, I never saw you." "Thank you," Sutton breathed. She grabbed the card. It was cold and heavy in her hand. She turned to leave, but Henderson grabbed her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Wait," he said, his eyes suddenly focusing, losing their drunken haze. "Brooks, he talked to you. Before the end." Sutton went rigid. "He just ordered a drink." "Don't lie to me, Sutton," Henderson whispered, pulling her closer. "The police asked about the waitress. They said on the security footage he handed you something. An envelope." Sutton's mind raced. The cameras. Of course. "It was a tip," she said, her voice trembling. "Cash, that's it." Henderson stared at her for a long, agonizing second. Then he released her wrist. "Go," he said, turning back to his bottle. "Just go, before I remember to tell Detective Miller about you." Sutton didn't wait. She bolted for the service stairs. She didn't take the elevator down. It was too loud. She ran down 36 flights of concrete stairs, her footsteps echoing like gunshots in the stairwell. By the time she reached the 40th floor, her legs were burning and her lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. She stopped at the heavy steel door marked Server Maintenance. Authorized personnel only. She pressed the keycard to the reader. Beep, click. The light turned green. Sutton pushed the door open and stepped into the hum of the machine. The room was vast, chilled to a near-freezing temperature to protect the equipment. Rows of black server racks stretched out into the darkness, blinking with thousands of tiny blue and green LED lights. It sounded like a hive of digital bees. Sutton put in her earpiece. "Timothy, I'm in." "Okay," Timothy's voice crackled in her ear. "Find the main terminal. It should be an isolated console, probably in the center of the room. It's the only one with a direct hardline to the Swift banking backbone." Sutton moved through the aisles. The air was dry and sterile. She felt like an intruder in a temple of invisible money. In the center of the room, sitting on a metal desk, was a single computer terminal. It looked surprisingly old, a bulky monitor and a mechanical keyboard. "I found it," she said. She sat down. The chair was cold. "Power it up," Timothy commanded. "Do not, I repeat, do not, connect to the Wi-Fi. Use the Ethernet cable only. We need to be a ghost." Sutton hit the power button. The screen flickered to life, showing a simple DOS-like command prompt. "Okay," Sutton said, her fingers hovering over the keys. "I'm at the prompt. What do I type?" "You don't type code yet," Timothy said. "You type the word, the napkin." Sutton took a deep breath. She typed, "Cryptaya 00." She hit enter. The screen went black. For a terrifying moment, she thought she had bricked the system. Then a single line of text appeared in bright red pixelated font. "Authentication required. Dialect recognized. Zurich protocol. Enter passphrase." "Passphrase," Sutton whispered. "Timothy, there's a second layer. Brooks didn't give me a passphrase." "Think, Sutton," Timothy yelled in her ear. "The napkin. Was there anything else? A number? A symbol?" Sutton pulled the crumpled napkin out of her pocket. She smoothed it out on the metal desk. "Cryptaya 00, the cross-strike Z, the blue ink." "Nothing," she said, panic rising in her throat. "Just the word." "Wait," Timothy said. "You said you're a linguist. Look at the word cryptaya. In Sparta, the cryptaya weren't just killers. They were a rite of passage. What was the final test for a member of the cryptaya?" Sutton closed her eyes, digging through her memory of ancient Greek history. They had to survive the winter. And they had to kill a helot without being seen. It was about invisibility. "Silence." "Silence," Timothy repeated. "Try silence in the dialect of the cipher. Swiss-German banking code." Sutton typed, "Still, access denied." "No," she said, "that's too modern. Brooks was old school. He was classics." She looked at the screen. The cursor blinked, mocking her. What if it's not a word? Sutton realized. What if it's the absence of a word? The zero accounts. They don't exist. She looked at the prompt. Enter passphrase. She didn't type anything. She simply pressed the spacebar once, then hit enter. The screen flashed green. Access granted. Welcome, administrator. I'm in, she exhaled. It was a null cipher, an empty space. Brilliant, Timothy breathed. Now find the transfer. Search for the routing number associated with the Washington Teachers Fund. Sutton's fingers flew across the mechanical keys. The click-clack sound was rhythmic, soothing. She navigated through directories of hidden accounts, shell companies inside shell companies. It was a Russian nesting doll of fraud. Found it, she said. Transaction pending, $200,000. Scheduled for final clearance at 3 a.m. EST. That's 40 minutes from now. Cancel it, Timothy said. Abort the command. Sutton typed, abort. The screen flashed. Authorization level insufficient. Biometric override required or dual key authorization. I can't stop it, Sutton said, her voice rising. It needs a fingerprint or a second password from a different user. Damn it, Timothy cursed. They rigged it. Wait, download the ledger. If we can't stop the money, we can prove where it's going. We can burn them down with the evidence. Downloading now, Sutton said. She initiated the transfer to her encrypted USB drive. A progress bar appeared. 0%, 5%. It was moving agonizingly slow. 10%. Suddenly, the lights in the server room flickered. The hum of the cooling fans died down. The silence returned, heavy and oppressive. "Timothy?" Sutton touched her ear. "Timothy, the power just dipped." Static. "Timothy?" Nothing. Her earpiece was dead. The elevator doors at the far end of the server room pinged. Sutton spun around, crouching behind the desk. The doors opened. 2 men in tactical gear stepped out, holding flashlights attached to submachine guns. Between them walked a man in a bespoke suit, looking as calm as if he were walking into a board meeting. It was Jonathan Cross. "Search the rows," Cross said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm. "The system detected a breach at Terminal 4. Find the rat." Sutton pressed her hand over her mouth. The progress bar on the screen was at 24%. She couldn't run. She couldn't hide. And she couldn't disconnect the drive without losing the evidence. She was trapped in the dark with the monster. Sutton huddled under the metal desk, the cold steel biting into her knees. She could hear the heavy boots of the tactical team crunching on the anti-static floor. Crunch, crunch. They were splitting up. One was coming down the left aisle, the other down the right. Cross was walking down the center, straight toward the terminal. Sutton looked at the screen above her. 31%. It was too slow. The file was massive, terabytes of transaction history dating back 20 years. It wasn't just the pension fund, it was everything. Every bribe, every payoff, every dirty deal Apex Global had ever made. She had to buy time. She looked around. Under the desk, there was a tangle of cables. A thick black power cord snake along the floor toward a secondary server rack, the backup power unit. If she pulled it, the backup alarm would trigger. It would be loud. It would give away her position instantly. But it might also trigger the fire suppression system. The footsteps were getting closer. Cross was 10 feet away. "Come out," Cross called out, his voice echoing. "I know you're there." The system logged a login from the guest account. "That's you, isn't it, Sutton? The waitress who thinks she's a spy." Sutton froze. He knew her name. "Henderson told me," Cross continued, strolling closer. "Poor Henderson. He was very helpful before we let him go. Severance package, you could say." Sutton felt a wave of nausea. Henderson was dead. "You have the ledger," Cross said, stopping just on the other side of the desk. Sutton could see his polished Oxfords. "But you don't know how to read it. You think it's just money? It's leverage. That file contains the names of senators, judges, generals. If you release it, you don't just hurt me. You destabilize the entire G7 summit." 45%. "Come out, Sutton. I'll make you a deal. The money Brooks offered you, 10,000. I'll add 3 zeros to it, $10 million. You walk away. You disappear. You live a life of luxury in Bali." Sutton's hand tightened around the power cord. $10 million. It was more money than she could fathom. It would erase her father's debt. It would erase her past. But she remembered Brooks's face, the fear, the desperation. Innocent people are going to lose everything. She wasn't her father. She wouldn't be silenced. Sutton ripped the power cord from the wall. Klaxon, klaxon, klaxon. A deafening siren shrieked through the room. Amber strobe lights began to flash, disorienting and bright. "Contact!" one of the guards shouted. Sutton scrambled out from under the desk, not away from them, but toward the fire alarm pull station on the wall. "Stop her!" Cross yelled, his composure breaking. A guard raised his weapon. Sutton threw herself at the wall, slamming her fist onto the red lever. Whoosh! The halon gas suppression system engaged. It wasn't water. Water ruined servers. It was gas, designed to suck the oxygen out of the air to starve a fire. A thick white fog erupted from the ceiling nozzles, filling the room instantly. The temperature dropped even further. "Masks on!" a guard screamed. Sutton didn't have a mask. She took a deep breath of the remaining clean air, grabbed the USB drive, now at 52%, corrupt, but maybe readable, and dove into the white mist. She couldn't see anything. The white fog was like milk. She crawled on her hands and knees, using the floor tiles to navigate. She knew the layout. She had memorized the floor plan during her orientation 3 years ago, a habit from her paranoid father. Left at the 3rd row, right at the cooling unit. She could hear the guards coughing, their boots heavy and clumsy. The gas was displacing the oxygen. They were disoriented. Sutton reached the ventilation shaft in the corner of the room. It was small, barely big enough for a person, but she was slender. She used a screwdriver from her pocket, her wine key from her waitress apron, to pry the grate loose. Clang! The grate fell. Over there! A flashlight beam cut through the fog. A bullet sparked against the server rack inches from her head. Sutton scrambled into the vent, pulling her legs up just as another shot rang out, embedding itself in the drywall. She shimmied backward into the darkness of the shaft, the metal cold against her stomach. She replaced the grate as best she could. She was in the walls. She crawled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The air in the vent was dusty but breathable. She could hear Cross screaming orders below. "Seal the building. She's in the vents. Shut down the elevators. Nobody leaves." Sutton checked her phone. No signal. The metal shaft was a Faraday cage. She was alone. She looked at the USB drive in her hand. 52%. Was it enough? She crawled for what felt like hours, navigating the labyrinth of the building's HVAC system. She needed to get to the roof. The police were on the ground, but Cross controlled the lobby. If she went down, she was dead. If she went up, maybe she could signal for help. She reached a vertical shaft with a ladder. She climbed, her muscles screaming. Floor 50, 60, 70. Finally, she reached the roof access hatch. She pushed it open. The wind hit her like a physical blow. The rain was torrential now. She pulled herself up onto the gravel roof of the Columbia Tower. The city was a sprawling map of lights below her. She was 76 stories up, exposed, freezing, and holding the most dangerous hard drive in the world. She pulled out her phone. 1 bar of signal. She dialed Timothy. "Sutton," Timothy screamed. "I thought you were dead. The news is reporting a gas leak at the tower." "I'm on the roof," Sutton yelled over the wind. "I have half the data. Cross is below. He knows who I am." "Listen to me," Timothy said. "You can't go down. He has mercenaries covering every exit." "But I made a call. Remember my insurance policy? The one I told you about?" "The FBI?" Sutton asked. "No. The FBI is compromised. That's why Cross is so confident. I called the one person who hates Cross more than we do. Elena Vance." Sutton's eyes widened. Elena Vance was the investigative journalist for The Times, famous for destroying the careers of corrupt senators. She was also Ainsley Brooks's estranged daughter. "She's circling in a news chopper," Timothy said. "She was trying to get footage of the crime scene. I patched into her frequency. She's coming to you. Look for the light." Sutton looked up. Through the driving rain, she saw a spotlight cut through the clouds. The thwop 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 of rotors grew louder. But at that moment, the roof access door slammed open behind her. Sutton spun around. Jonathan Cross stepped onto the roof. He wasn't alone. He had 2 men with him, and he was holding a gun. "Nowhere left to run, Sutton," Cross shouted, walking toward her. The wind whipped his tie around his neck. "Give me the drive, and maybe I let you jump. It's a quicker death than what my men will do to you." Sutton backed up. Her heels were on the edge of the parapet. Behind her was a 1,000-foot drop. She clutched the drive to her chest. "You killed him," Sutton screamed. "You killed Brooks because he was going to stop the transfer." "I killed him because he was weak," Cross roared. "He grew a conscience. Conscience is bad for business. Now give it to me." The helicopter roared overhead, its spotlight blinding Cross for a second. The wind from the rotors knocked Sutton to her knees. She saw the side door of the helicopter slide open. A camera operator was filming. "Smile, Jonathan," Sutton yelled, holding up the drive. "You're on live TV." Cross looked up, shielding his eyes. He saw the news logo on the chopper. He realized his mistake. He lowered the gun, panic flashing across his face. If he shot her now, the world would see it. But Cross was a gambler. He raised the gun again. "They can't broadcast if the feed cuts," he snarled. He aimed at Sutton. Bang! Sutton flinched, but she didn't feel pain. Cross dropped his gun. He grabbed his shoulder, staggering back. Sutton looked toward the roof access door. Detective Miller stood there, his service weapon drawn, smoke curling from the barrel. Behind him were 4 uniformed SWAT officers. "Drop it," Miller screamed, advancing on Cross. "Get on the ground, now." Cross looked at the police, then at the helicopter, then at Sutton. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "You think this is over?" Cross shouted over the wind. "You think arrest stops this? I am the economy." "You're under arrest for murder," Miller shouted, tackling Cross to the wet gravel. Sutton slumped against the parapet, the adrenaline leaving her body. She watched as they cuffed him. Detective Miller walked over to her. He looked tired. "Henderson talked," Miller said, offering her a hand, "before he died from the alcohol poisoning, or whatever poison they gave him. He left a voicemail on the precinct line, said you were in danger, said Cross was the guy." Sutton took his hand and stood up. She was shaking. "I have the proof," she said, handing him the wet USB drive. "It's all here." Miller took the drive. He looked at it, then at her. "You're a hell of a waitress, kid." The interrogation room at the FBI Seattle field office was painted a color Sutton decided to call bureaucratic beige, a shade designed to suck the hope out of the air. It was a windowless box that smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. It had been 12 hours since Sutton had come off the roof of the Columbia Tower. Her clothes were still damp, clinging uncomfortably to her skin, though someone had draped a coarse, scratchy wool blanket over her shoulders. She sat with her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of lukewarm water, watching the steam fail to rise. The door buzzed and swung open. Special Agent Reynolds walked in. He looked like he had been carved out of granite, humorless, efficient, and wearing a suit that cost more than Sutton's car. He didn't smile. He didn't introduce himself. He simply sat down across the metal table, placed a thick file folder between them, and stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Sutton refused to fidget, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You realize," Reynolds began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, "that you committed approximately 40 federal felonies last night. Breaking and entering, unauthorized access to a secure banking network, theft of proprietary data, destruction of property." He tapped the file with a manicured finger. "I could keep going, but I think you get the idea. By the letter of the law, Ms. Blake, you should be looking at 20 years in federal prison." Sutton tightened her grip on the cup. "I didn't steal the money," she said, her voice raspy from the smoke and the screaming. "I saved the teacher's pension fund. And I caught a murderer." "Technically," Reynolds corrected, leaning back in his chair, "Detective Miller caught the murderer. You just acted as the bait." "I was the only one who could open the door," Sutton shot back, her exhaustion giving way to a spark of defiance. "If I hadn't gone in, Cross would have transferred that money by 3:12 a.m. Your agents would have been investigating a theft instead of preventing one." Reynolds held her gaze for a long moment. Then the granite facade cracked, just a fraction. He opened the file. "You're right," he admitted. "The data on that drive, even at 52% completion, is devastating. We've already frozen Cross's assets. We have indictments ready for 6 members of the Apex board. And we found the transfer order. The money hadn't cleared yet. We stopped it." Sutton let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 3 years. Her shoulders slumped under the heavy blanket. "So it's over. For Cross?" "Yes, he'll never see the outside of a cell," Reynolds said. "For you, that depends." "Depends on what?" Sutton asked, eyeing the file. Reynolds leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from interrogator to recruiter. "The code you used, Cryptia 00. We had our best cyber forensics team look at the server logs. They told me that wasn't just a password. That was a master key created by Lucas Vane. We've been looking for Vane's algorithms for a decade." He paused, studying her face. "The fact that you recognized it, deciphered the null cipher context, and navigated the architecture, that's not waitress skills, Ms. Blake. That's genius-level intuition." "I have a doctorate in computational linguistics," Sutton said defensively, the old wound of her interrupted life stinging. "Or I would have, if I hadn't dropped out to pay my father's debts." Reynolds's expression softened. For the first time, he looked at her with genuine sympathy. "We know about your father, Sutton. Robert Blake was a good man, a brilliant forensic accountant. We dug into the old files after last night." Sutton went still. "What did you find?" "He was getting close to this same network when he died," Reynolds said gently. "We found a payout order on the drive you recovered. It was dated the day before his car accident. It was labeled Mechanic, Blake Cleanup." Tears pricked Sutton's eyes, hot and sudden. She had always known deep down. She had felt it in the way the police had brushed off the investigation, calling it drunk driving when her father hadn't touched a drop in 20 years. But hearing it confirmed by the FBI, seeing the truth acknowledged in a federal room, was like a physical weight being lifted off her chest. He was right, she whispered. He wasn't paranoid. He was right. He was, Reynolds confirmed, and Cross killed him for it. This drive proves it. You didn't just save the pension fund, Sutton. You solved your father's murder. Sutton wiped her eyes with the corner of the scratchy blanket. She took a moment to compose herself. So, she sniffed, straightening her spine, am I going to jail? Reynolds closed the file with a decisive thud. The Department of Justice is willing to offer you a deal. Total immunity for all crimes committed last night. The breaking and entering, the hacking, it all goes away. But, Sutton asked, there's always a but? But we have a problem, Reynolds said. We have terabytes of encrypted data from Cross's servers. It's in dialects and ciphers we don't understand. Old banking codes, dead languages, mathematical riddles based on classical literature. Our guys are engineers. They think in binary. We need a translator. Someone who thinks like a thief but acts like a linguist. Reynolds reached into his pocket and slid a business card across the metal table. It was heavy cream-colored cardstock. It didn't have a logo, just a number. We don't pay waiting wages, Sutton. Starting salary is $150,000 a year, plus full federal benefits. You can finish your doctorate on our dime. We'll even clear your father's name publicly. Sutton looked at the card. It was a lifeline. It was a future. You want me to work for the FBI? No. Reynolds smiled, a rare, genuine expression. The FBI is too public. You'd be working for the unit that doesn't exist, the one that cleans up the messes the billionaires leave behind. We need people who can see the invisible, Sutton, like you. Sutton picked up the card. She thought about the obsidian room, the way the rich looked right through her as she poured their scotch, the way she had been a piece of furniture to them. She realized that invisibility wasn't a curse, it was a superpower, and she was done serving drinks. I have one condition, Sutton said, her voice steady. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. You're in a position to negotiate? I am, she said. The $10,000 Ainsley Brooks promised me, the money he offered for the translation. Technically, that's evidence, Reynolds said. I don't want it for me, Sutton said firmly. I want it donated to the Bremerton Public Library in Ainsley Brooks's name. He died trying to do the right thing. I want that on the record. Reynolds looked at her with a newfound respect. He nodded slowly. Done. We'll make the transfer tomorrow. Sutton stood up, letting the wool blanket fall from her shoulders. She felt lighter than she had in years. Then I guess I have a new job, she said. Reynolds stood and offered his hand. Welcome to the team, Agent Blake. 6 months later, the rain in Seattle hadn't changed. It still battered the city with a relentless rhythmic drumming, washing the grit into the gutters. But the view from the other side of the glass had changed entirely. 6 months ago, Sutton Blake had watched the storm from the cracked windshield of a 2008 Honda, counting tips to see if she could afford a new alternator. Now she watched it from the 34th floor of a nondescript federal building overlooking the Puget Sound. The office was quiet, smelling of ozone and expensive tea, a stark contrast to the grease and panic of the obsidian room. Sutton adjusted her glasses and turned back to her dual-monitor setup. Her nameplate, simple and silver, read S. Blake, Senior Cryptographic Analyst. On the screen, lines of code cascaded like digital rain. She was currently dissecting a cryptocurrency laundering scheme based out of Macau. The syndicates thought they were clever, hiding their transaction keys inside the digital metadata of digitized Tang Dynasty poetry. To a standard FBI algorithm, it looked like random noise or corruption. To Sutton, it was a rhythm. She spotted the anomaly in the third stanza, a syntax error in the character for moon that didn't align with the poetic meter. It wasn't a typo, it was a backdoor. Got you, she whispered. She typed a command, executing a trace that would freeze their assets before they finished their morning tea. Enter. The file compressed and sent. Another empire toppled with a keystroke. Her secure phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. Sutton flinched. Old habits died hard, but relaxed when she saw the name. It wasn't a threat. It was Timothy. The shop is finally in the black. Sold a first edition Dickens this morning to a collector who didn't even haggle. Pot roast Sunday, bring an appetite. Sutton smiled, the tension in her shoulders dissolving. Timothy wasn't just her father's old partner anymore, he was the family she had chosen. She typed back, "I'll bring the wine, and not the boxed stuff this time. See you at 7. She locked her workstation and opened the bottom drawer of her desk. There, resting on a velvet cushion inside a small UV-protected glass case, was a cocktail napkin. The blue ink had faded slightly, but the jagged, desperate scrawl was still legible. Cryptaya 00. It was a memento mori, a relic from a night that felt a lifetime away. Ainsley Brooks had died terrified, thinking he had failed to stop the rot at Apex Global. He hadn't known that his last desperate act, handing a waitress a puzzle, would trigger a chain reaction that saved 40,000 pensions and put Jonathan Cross behind bars for life. Sutton ran her thumb over the glass case. The world was full of codes. Some were written in C++, others in the subtle body language of powerful men who looked right through people like her. She used to be invisible, a ghost in a stained apron. Now she was the hunter in the machine. She grabbed her trench coat and walked out of the office, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. She stepped onto the wet pavement of 4th Avenue, pulling her collar up against the chill. She blended perfectly into the crowd, just another face in the rain. The billionaire had offered her $1,000 for a word. She gave him the truth instead. And for Sutton Blake, the truth had turned out to be the only currency that mattered. Sutton Blake didn't just clear her debt that night, she cleared the ledger for an entire city. She proved that while money talks, the truth screams louder. Ainsley Brooks's final act wasn't a suicide note, it was a hiring test, and Sutton was the only one qualified to pass. Today, Sutton works in the shadows, catching the white-collar criminals that the law can't touch. She never forgot the lesson of the napkin. Sometimes, the most valuable thing isn't the money on the table, but the person standing next to it. If you loved this twisty thriller, hit that like button to help us beat the algorithm. Subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. And comment below, what's the biggest secret you've ever overheard? You never know. It might be a code.